From Los Angeles, the home of film and television, this is Film Music Live, a webcast featuring outstanding composers, orchestrators, filmmakers, and more from the world of music for film, television, and video games, talking about their work and answering your questions. Film Music Live is sponsored by the Film Music Network and Film Music Institute. And now the host of Film Music Live, Daniel Schweiger.
Hey everyone, I'm Daniel Schweiger, and welcome to Film Music Live, the show where you get to ask the questions to today's top composers. I'm happy to have you here. When it comes to creating iconic horror anti-heroes with a killer tune and smile, a duo to watch out for while applauding their jaw-dropping deaths are composer JOSEPH LoDUCA and writer-director and showrunner Don Mancini. A match wonderfully made in big and small screen hell if there ever was one. Making a chainsawing musical splash with his first score for Sam Raimi's The Evil Dead, LoDUCA would go on to score just about every iteration of Ash, from the original trilogy to his cable incarnation as Ash vs. The Evil Dead, potently mixing horror and humor among such notably straight-laced chiller soundtracks as Brotherhood of the Wolf, Boogeyman, and The Messengers. As a co-writer, Don Mancini sprang from writing Cellar Dweller to hit Good Guy Gold with the screenplay of Child's Play. While he'd have a tasty TV dinner as a producer and writer for the brilliantly transgressive Hannibal, Mancini would make it his mission to spread the gospel of killer doll liquid sexuality, taking command of the Chuckyverse with the scripts and direction of Seed, Curse, and Cult of Chucky, before finally unleashing the character's arguably most evil and twisted adventures on the show Chucky. First having him bring havoc on teens from suburbia to a movie theater on the first season, then moving to the unholy action to a monastery while possessing an imagined Jennifer Tilly, Chucky's ongoing third season brings the big and small screen bands back together to strangle the flag out of the White House. Playing an alternately deadly and satirical tune from Curse and Cult to a gore-drenched Oval Office is JOSEPH LoDUCA, whose Chucky scoring never fails to amuse and terrify for what's likely the most wonderfully sacrilegious translation of a horror icon to television, one that always feels like one foul-mouthed, bloodily rainbow-colored continuation of the Chuckyverse, wherever Mancini's imagination and LoDUCA's scoring might devilishly take it. And now here's the good guy tag team when it comes to unleashing the music and mayhem of Chucky. Welcome to Film Music Live, JOSEPH LoDUCA and Don Mancini.
Thanks for having us.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Well, it's great to have you both here. I'm a huge fan of the season and the show. And you know what's cool is that both of you essentially started right off the bat with two of the greatest horror franchises ever. Joseph with you in The Evil Dead, and Don with you with Chucky, Child's Play. I guess just before we even get started, tell me about your origins and just right off the bat going into these films.
Go ahead, Don. You start.
You first? Oh, okay. Well, I, as a really little kid, I first got into horror through the TV show Dark Shadows, the 1960s soap opera iteration. I was mad for it. And I even learned the word shadow from that show. That's how young I was. I think I was 3 or 4. And so then a few years later, when I started actually getting interested in film and filmmaking, and then I started getting into movies. There's movies from the mid-70s that were like about telekinetic or telepathic or somehow supernaturally endowed children who are rebelling against the status quo, like The Omen and The Exorcist and Carrie and The Fury. I loved all of that. And I'm sure that being raised as a Catholic kid probably influenced my response to those movies. And along the same time, I fell in love with the music scores of this genre. And I think partly because of why one of the reasons I'm interested in the horror genre itself creatively is I love the intersection between the horrible and the beautiful. I love that kind of that intersection of, someone who's like showing something horrible happening, but with an incredibly stylized aesthetic approach to it. Like the films of Brian De Palma. And so the music, we were talking earlier about The Fury, which is such a great horror score. But anyway, as a budding young film enthusiast, I of course loved The Evil Dead when that first showed up in, well, I think the first time I saw it was 82, 83. And it, blew me away, and I loved the score. And so as a fan of those movies, and I watched the whole evolution of the original trilogy and was so excited on the film score geek front to see like how Joe built the concepts of the score from the first movie with a bigger orchestra in part two. And I just thought that was really thrilling. And then branching out into a slightly different genre with that, medieval tinge that Army of Darkness had. So I was a huge fan of Joe's, legitimate fan of Joe's music. I also really loved Brotherhood of the Wolf and that movie as well. I belabor all of this to like set the table for like when Richard Kraft first introduced us and suggested that we might like working together. I went, yes, please. And it's been 10 years now.
Yeah. So right. Props to Richard. And Don, I didn't know that. I didn't know you knew my music too much.
Yes, you did.
I was not aware of that.
Yes, you were.
But obviously
I sing it to you all the time.
It was kind of inevitable in a way, I suppose. Like Don, I was raised Catholic. First time I saw The Exorcist, I did not sleep for a couple of days, and kind of avoided the genre really because I was impressionable. But being involved with Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell and Rob Tappert on Evil Dead was just sort of dumb luck. We were in the same town at the same time, and through a rather random introduction, I was asked to do a film score, and I was still in college at that point. And I owned no soundtrack records. It wasn't even a possibility that a kid from Detroit was going to become a film composer. It was just not on my radar at all. So when I heard Bernard Herrmann, I went, oh, it's kind of French. Okay, unresolved tonalities. Oh, the visceral rhythmic. Oh, that's kind of like Stravinsky if I heard Jerry Goldsmith, So I would interpret through that lens until I got educated in film music and actually become involved in the process of storytelling. And what I'm really continually enjoying with Don is a fan of music in general and has a great knowledge, probably surpassing mine in film music and film music history. But the idea of our collaborating on things that are both horrible, both beautiful, that can convey those sentiments at the same time, often, and leaning this way or the other because of the rich history. We kind of lean into it at times and tell our own little inside jokes in the music. It's continually a blast.
Now, Chucky isn't the first icon to get turned into a television series. I think we all remember Freddy's Nightmares. And we've had an amazing Hannibal with Don that you worked on turned into a really amazing television series. And obviously, Joe, you followed Evil Dead to the wonderful Ash vs. the Evil Dead series on cable. What did that teach you, I guess, to you both about how do you do a successful horror movie star to television translation?
Well, that's a Don question, but what I'm so impressed with the Chucky series is that I told Don it's a trifecta. I mean, he brought along the cult of fans that are with Chucky no matter what. I've been to conventions, I've seen ladies with Chucky tattoos on their thighs. I mean, it's deep. And also to tell the story to a new generation with our teen heroes, and to extend it into a lot of contemporary issues with domestic, and sexual, and a lot of contemporary things that are going on. I mean, we're in the White House this season. If there was ever a time to bring Chucky into the chaos, it's now.
What do you think? I mean, but he is an independent president. Let's make that clear. It's nonpartisan.
Yes.
Don, I mean, what was the key for you doing such a successful television series out of this?
Well, one of the reasons I even wanted to do it was after having worked first on Hannibal and then on Channel Zero, which was created and showrun by my friend Nick Antosca, who is also an EP on this show, on Chucky. I learned on Hannibal first that how television, but by its very nature, even more than movies, because the product, you have to turn out an assembly line in a way, not to sound like too businesslike about it, but there is that aspect of it that you have to serve the machine and serially turn out a number of episodes. And just the nature of making television is, for the most part, and this was, interesting because it was just an issue in our recently resolved strike. It's very collaborative by nature. And my experience on Hannibal was that it was like amazing fan fiction written by experts, because when I first worked on the show, I was such a huge fan of that entire franchise. And then when it became a television show, I was watching quite closely and wondering at first, how are they going to do this? I'm skeptical. Anthony Hopkins is irreplaceable. And just the reinvention of it was so huge. And in my experience working on it was, there are all of these Hannibal and horror genre fanatics, in the ranks of the writers, the directors, the producers, that I realized, hey, if I do this with my own franchise and invite all of these, Chucky fanatics who feel as passionate about Chucky as I and my fellow cohorts on Hannibal did, I thought this could elevate it to a new level. And, I've always been interested, even in the movies, of kind of reinventing it every time. And so taking it into the television medium in and of itself represented the most radical reinvention of the franchise to that point, because it's a completely different kind of storytelling than movies. It's much more about characters and relationships. And I really relished that as well.
Yeah, it's great work. And that brings us to our first question from Louis Versellini. It's for you, Joseph. You have scored several TV series and obviously are quite good at it. Does it get easier or harder each time, or does it depend on the project or genre that you're working in?
I've been fortunate to work on series that have had long runs, most of them, as a matter of fact. And that's really wonderful for a lot of reasons. You get familiar with it. You've got a template to work off of. But to keep it interesting, it's all in the writing. And if you want to take Chucky for an example, we've had 3 different distinct settings so far, and what to bring in each season that's going to add to the mythos. For example, in the current season, because we're in the White House, you have a lot of situations that would be sort of categorized as political intrigue, political drama. And to have that tone and things that sound, official, if you will, presidential, if you will, But to mix that with the horror and the dread that Chucky's just around the corner it adds a new element to the bouillabaisse, and it keeps it real interesting for me. So again, it's a blessing to have a story that continues, and it's even greater when the writers are continually challenging us all to go to the next level.
Don, did you like map out where each of the seasons would go right at the start?
Did you say, did I?
Oh yeah, did you map them out, or was it something went along, you made it up?
I had a loose map for how the show could extend beyond one season. You kind of have to do that, when you pitch a TV series. One of the things they really want to know is, how can this sustain past just 1 year? So in my original pitch for the show, one of the things I did was write the pilot and pitch the pilot and show them the script. But I gave them notions of where we could go in the future. Now, they've almost inevitably, they change radically. For example, I wasn't, when I first embarked on it and we started writing season 1, I sort of thought of the series as being more episodic and less serialized, or more anthological, put it that way. That after the first season, I thought like, oh, maybe these kids whom we introduced, maybe this will be the completion of their story, and then in season 2 we would have completely different roster of characters. But even as we were shooting the show and putting together episodes, we were all like saying, oh God, these kids are great, the characters are great. And sure enough, that was the response that the audience had as well. So I would say midway through shooting season 1, I slightly altered my plan in order to involve those characters, because I knew that we had more story to tell with them. And then the same thing has happened, of course, here with season 3.
Now, I've got a question for you, Joseph, from Ivan at the Bond Music. You have extensive experiences in creating music for both films and TV shows. In the case of the Chucky franchise, which one was harder for you creatively, or was it pleasant and easy? You both got your start off with the movies, Curse and Cult of Chucky.
Yeah, well, I guess what really cemented that Don and I were simpatico is that we, on Curse, immediately got the idea that this is a confined environment in what would be a haunted house story, in a way, in terms of the unwitting, victims. And so there's a certain tone to that. There's a certain type of quasi-orchestral dread that goes along with that. And then there's a little bit of backstory for Chucky that goes into that. And I got it right away. I mean, I've told this story before, but Nika is introduced in this, and she has to go up and down the flights in the house with an elevator. And I said, Don, that reminds me of this Olivia de Havilland movie with James
Lady in a
Bond.
Cage.
Exactly. Which I remember from Saturday morning television. And he goes, yeah, that's it. That's where it's from. And so, we were off and running. Cult, again, was so stylized in this remote sort of, almost The Shining type of environment in the tundra, all that blue, that it suggested a certain thing. But again, there's always a lot of color in what Don presents and how he frames shots. I mean, all his compositions, those shots are just amazing. So from a musical standpoint, it always begs for a lot of detail, I think, to me anyway. And so, I think they're all very interesting. What's interesting about the series is that we have all kinds of scenarios that present themselves. Not the least of which is there's a lot of licensing of contemporary songs, and often I have to write into them and out of them. And in doing so, it's not just as simple as a vamp that goes into it. Very often I'm setting up a dramatic situation. I'm often, with the permission of the licensor, really adding some darkness on top of a lot of the songs that you wouldn't know, that you might think that they're actually part of the song. And then we have the kids, I'll call them the kids, the teenagers, the heroes. So very often we want to make that contemporary in terms of electronic stuff that might sound like indie type of scoring. I mean, I think often the show is being marketed as a YA show.
Yeah.
So it kind of falls into that, but then, you know, Bernard Herrmann is always right around the corner. So there's a lot of mixing. Chucky was exercised. And so we knew what we were going to draw upon there, you know, the Christian horror anthology, singing in Latin, you know, there's a lot of, it's a lot. There's a lot going on in the music.
You know, Don, one of the things I really love about, and obviously, Joe, the thing I love about the show is just how well it balances humor and horror. And I think that's the mark of any kind of great pop culture horror icon like Freddy, is no matter what Freddy does, you just love the guy. And it's the same thing with Chucky, no matter how far Chucky goes. And I just don't know how far he's going to go after this season. But how difficult is that just to get that mix of horror and humor?
Well, it's one of the things that keeps me interested in doing this, honestly. I love experimenting with that tightrope walk, you know, the mix of horror and humor. It's really crucial, and I think we try to mix it up every movie and also every season of the show. So I think because we do that, the tone of our show is kind of complex and tricky. That it's like there is, like I said, a lot of tightrope walking, and I think that's one of the most crucial roles among many that Joe and his music plays on the show, is that helping us strike just the right tone. Because we have stuff that tries to touch the ground, you know, this kind of heartfelt, straightforward teenage angst, teenage romance, all of that stuff going. But at the same time, we have the inevitable absurdity of supernaturally possessed dolls, you know, invading realms and killing people in diabolically clever ways. You know, and so that mix of the stylized and, you know, sometimes parodistic, I think sometimes what we're doing with the show is we are, while presenting something, we're also sort of parodying the something slightly, or satirizing it and looking at it through a particular lens, because I think Chucky himself is really conducive to that. And I think Joe's work so successfully walks that line. And that's one of the things that I am constantly so amazed by and excited about. And as a fan, just as a fan of film music in general and Joe's work in particular, you know, it's just like, it's fun to experience it and participate in it.
Well, let me give you some examples of the fun stuff. Last season, Chucky is going to be discovered. This was in a teaser. And we find out, where is he? Where could he possibly be? And at the end of the teaser, he sticks his head up. He's been hiding in the toilet. And so the idea is, what are we going to do? What's the reveal? And it came to me. It was Creature from the Black Lagoon. So we went with that. You know, there's just the music, the muted brass of the 50s score. And it was hilarious. This season, I think it was, both of these were in the last episode that aired. One of them was, there was a bit of a montage of Chucky with Caroline, the character Caroline, through New York City. And it's a montage of them getting picked up by a cab. very stylized. And originally there was going to be a Chucky rap song that was from the 80s that we couldn't get the rights to. And Don said, well, I feel it's more of a main title. I went, North by Northwest. And it's not North by Northwest, but it is a very stylized, orchestral, exciting main salt bass main title of the Chucky.
It had that drive,
Yeah,
that
kind of
drive of
Right.
like the North by Northwest.
Yeah, exactly. And it wasn't the Fandango, but it was. But the whole idea is that it felt like, it's what was the movie High Anxiety? The great main title sequence of the
John Morris. Right?
Yeah, it's like one of those things.
Dun, dun. Yeah, that was like that almost was like a parody of Airport.
Yeah, exactly.
Dun, 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 dun.
And then when Miss Fairchild gets strangled by the flag, the whole idea in the last episode, Chucky strangling her with the flag. The idea was we're going to have a choir shout and groan and maiming sounds to the rhythm of America the Beautiful, and it was great. It was just great. It was a great moment.
Now let's talk about Jennifer Tilly, who just literally seizes every single scene she's in. It gives this whole unbelievably hilarious meta quality. What was the idea to get Jennifer to do this, and how do you score her, Joe?
Well, I think my impression of her as she's revealed in the first season, again, this is Jennifer Tilly today, because we often in season 1 we show the evolution of the character, and that music was very referential to what you might have heard in the 80s, right? But the theme itself was the idea is that I'm going to play her as a Hollywood vamp, really, and play that kind of danger, that sort of alluring but dangerous kind of melody, that type of orchestration, flutes and slinky violins. And that has worked out very, very well. And it's a theme that we continue to use even into this season. That just seems to work really, really well for that character.
And to me, that theme feels like Joe's version, like he's making Tiffany Catherine Trammell, and he's basic instincting Tiffany. That's my experience of it anyway, in a great way. It just makes me, that great slinkiness, of that theme from Basic Instinct. I feel like Joe has his own version of that going on with Tiffany.
What was just Jennifer's reaction, Don, when you said, okay, we're going to really take this whole thing to the next? I think in Seed of Chucky is where that really got started. Was she just like totally game for anything you wanted to throw in there?
she was always really game. I mean, we became friends pretty quickly when we first worked together on Bride of Chucky. And one of the reasons we did was because she really loves movies, and she loves going to movies. And that's sort of like what became the basis of our friendship, was just like going to movies and talking about them. And she's really smart about film history and actors and stuff, old movies. So, when I told her that I wanted to bring her back, and my main thing was I wanted to bring her back physically, even though in Bride of Chucky, her character, her physical human character, is killed half an hour into the movie and transferred into a doll. And, and the doll version of Tiffany is great as well. But I, especially for making my directorial debut, I wanted to direct Jennifer Tilly. I wanted Jennifer Tilly to be my leading lady, because it's just like that. Like, how many people get to do that? And that was fun. And plus, because we were friends, I figured she had to be nice to me. Which indeed she was, not because she had to, because she is. But yeah, she's always been up for anything, really. So much of what we do on the show, we do it with Chucky as well. We examine the persona of Tiffany, and we examine a sort of persona of Jennifer Tilly as a celebrity construct that exists in pop culture, and what does that mean? And over the course of the franchise and the movies and the TV show, she's played so many variations of it. She's played Tiffany, she's played Jennifer Tilly, she's played Tiffany pretending to be Jennifer Tilly, she's played the vice versa of that. So it's interesting and complex, and I think that's one of the things that keeps it interesting for all of us. And Joe is right there with us.
Well, I think that anytime she's on screen, the score is going to be melodramatic in some way, shape, or form. It's going to reference an earlier era, because it's Sunset Boulevard. I mean, it's there. It's kind of has that feeling for me.
One thing I really love about the show is the main title sequences, and like everyone, you get like something new and fun related to the show. And where did you get that idea? And Joe, what's it like scoring them?
Well, it's pretty much always the same. Every once in a while, there's a different treatment. I mean, for example, in season 2, the theme is sung by a boys' choir because of the exorcism, subplot. So, but it's pretty much always the same. What's different, what you're responding to, is the fact that every episode has a different object, which is key to that episode, that becomes the Chucky logo. I think that's what you're referring to.
Yeah, it's a fun thing to play with, and the company that we work with on those sequences, they're called Huge, and they're from London. Yeah, we have a blast, and I'll end up at the beginning of the season, I'll pitch a bunch of notions, but then they'll pitch a bunch of notions, and that's how we arrive at a lot of this stuff. But we do try to make each one interesting in and of itself. And I've been really happy with the title sequences thus far this year. And as Joe says, I mean, maybe you'll see one episode will have some special treatment of the title theme.
One thing I really love, it's kind of one of the really kind of daring things about the show is the idea of, again, fluid sexuality, when you actually brought the doll to life in the last season with human beings. And again, the relationships between the young characters in this one. How important was that for you, Don, to make it part of the show? And what's it like for you to score that material, Joseph?
Well, for me, it's been great writing those characters. I always loved the characters of Glenn and Glenda from Seed of Chucky. And even though that movie, when it came out, it wasn't successful at the box office, its reputation has kind of grown over the years, which has been really nice to see. And I've actually, of all of the movies, I think that's the one that I hear from fans the most, because I hear from a lot of queer fans, gay fans, trans fans about how much those characters meant to them. And so the television show provided a unique opportunity to explore those characters in a deeper way, in which I think we did last season. And I think Lachlan Watson did such an amazing job playing those characters, and then ultimately them going back into the doll and becoming Gigi. And I think one of I just very quickly, I shouldn't speak for Joe, but one of the things I think that he does in scoring Gigi and even Jennifer Tilly, who, even though, as you say, Joe, she is sort of melodramatic, but for the most part, we don't play the comedy. For the most part, the music sort of takes the emotions of even the most absurd characters seriously. And I think that that's really important, and part of the success of the show, and of again, striking just that right balance, because it could so easily all just fall apart, you know, if the music is like too pleased with itself or too funny or too leaning into that or whatever. And I think Joe always like walks that line.
Yeah, and I when I refer to melodramatic, it's not to be used as necessarily a device for camp or humor. Sometimes it is, but I think it's the idea of being authentic to the character.
Yeah.
And to that end, when we talk about Gigi, Tiffany's a mom. And we do play that in season 2. And I think in some ways, Gigi is a hero in the second season. And
Totally.
going back into the form of the doll, that it's a very poignant scene at the end of the season. It really is. And it was treated that way. It was really, again, kind of fantastic and beautiful in a way, and very kind of touching. I think that we hit the right note there.
Yeah.
Now, Joseph, Dale would love to know, can you talk about your guitar viola instrument, and did you use it on Chucky? Because he know you used it on your Evil Dead game score.
Oh, I use it every chance I get. Where is it? It's here. Well, I have 3 of them. This one is because it's the smallest one. It's very cool. You bow it, but it's got frets like a guitar, so that since I don't have another lifetime to play in tune, it comes in handy. And that plays Jennifer's theme. It plays a lot of different themes. Also, it's capable of some really horrific sounds, electronic sounds. And all the kids have them. I mean, this probably every composer in Hollywood has one of these models, and it's made by an obsessed luthier named Jonathan Wilson, who got in way over his head designing these things because he can't keep up with the demand. But it's come in very, very handy all the time, and it's great for horror scores. It's great for sort of ethnic, rough, sort of folkloric type things for me. It doesn't replace a real cello or violin, but it comes in handy. And so much of what I do is handmade anyway, so I like getting my hands on an instrument and putting that into the score.
I guess, right, obviously you've had some really talented composers doing, Chucky scores, Joseph Renzi, I'm sorry, from the first one. You had Graham Revell. Was it like toys would always be part of the sound of toys? Would they always be part of the Chucky musical equation? I mean, Don, even in your own head, or Joseph, like, okay, this is automatically a choice here.
Well, I think that one of the things that's so interesting about the score to the first movie by Joe Renzetti, and I love that score, by the way, is that it doesn't do what you're talking about. It doesn't do that, music box or toy piano or any of that. In fact, he kind of like goes in the opposite direction. And that score was, to me, surprisingly and interestingly electronic and percussive, like very percussive and boomy. And it gave, like, I felt like, I mean, I wasn't privy to the conversations between Tom Holland, the director of that movie, and Joe, the composer, other Joe. But I assume that that was a deliberate choice, and that like what he was trying to evoke there was this kind of like otherworldly sound that suggested the scope of the dark magic that Charles Lee Ray is drawing on to drive his first adventure as a doll. So then when we did the second movie, the director of that movie, John LaFia, he hired Graham Revell. He and John and I had seen the movie. What was the movie with Nicole Kidman and Sam Neill? Dead Calm. that Graham had done, and so and we really liked that, and so John hired Graham, and Graham, we just sort of decided collectively, but I think it was really driven by John LaFia, like, let's go in a completely different direction, and try to evoke like classic Universal monster movies. And so like that score, like as Graham himself would always say, the joke in a way was like how grand it was, the grandiosity behind this diminutive, goofy little thing who, stabs people and says fuck a lot. And so it's like each movie, because we're all, as I said, always trying to reinvent it. I think, we've been lucky to work with some very talented composers who brought their own specific vibe to it. And I really love that. And I loved Pino Donaggio's vibe that he brought to Seed. But with Joe, I just like feel like I found, we found the house composer, the person who, like, for whatever reason, I can't speak for Joe, just really seems to empathize with this character.
Yes. The feigned innocence, but what lurks below the surface.
Is that what it is? That's the secret.
I guess so.
The secret sauce.
Yeah, right. Well, to Don's credit, I wasn't really terribly knowledgeable about the music for Chucky being brought in to Curse, and
you didn't need to be.
Well, and Don said, "Don't worry about that. Make it yours." And I think that, to me, the idea was this mass marketed toy that had, turned into this monster, and so the theme itself was a toy piano that was broken and detuned, but underneath that is a very, very dark and muscular and big type of undercurrent. And I think that very often, Chucky always first appears as an innocent toy. And so sometimes we play something like that, but it's always off kilter. I mean, it's always weird, detuned, broken bells, something or other, when we first see him kind of ingratiate himself to a new victim. And then it goes dark.
And I also think that the way Joe uses electronics with a symphonic sound, it feels unique to me. And I think, and again, really key in capturing the tone that we need to grab to make the show work. Because I feel like so often, Joe, like my impression of like a lot of what the electronic component, if there, there is an overt one in what you're doing, it's somehow, it makes it feel of this time. It makes it feel contemporary.
I hope that,
yeah, and
hope
relevant
that's what it is. I hope
to audiences in 2023.
Well, well, I hope that it's both classic and modern at the same time, and in such a blend that both audiences kind of feel it on a gut level, and that it appears to be not an add-on; it's integral to the sound of the music. So it's not forced. It's something that feels very natural, and if that is successful, then I'm very gratified that that's the result.
I'd say this. So to wrap our show up, today's October 23rd. I cannot wait to see the mid treehouse White House Oval Office pause on Wednesday night. And I heard negotiations are recommencing between SAG and the producers tomorrow. I heard Chucky is going to be in the room. How quick, if things, God willing, Chucky willing, get resolved, hopefully soon, how quick are you ready to jump right back in and get this Chucky back on the road?
We're getting ready. I mean, I'm, taking advantage of our strike, the writer's strike being over now for a few weeks, back in the writer's room, and we're, tweaking the last two episodes, the scripts for the last two episodes, because we've basically we finished, I mean, obviously 1 through 4, which have aired this month, 4 airing this week on Wednesday. But episodes 5 and 6, we have just a day to finish both of those. Like we have a schedule, which who knows is when it's going to exactly get enacted. It's going to depend on when the SAG settles. But we have about a month of shooting to complete mostly 7 and 8. Even though we do have pieces of 7 and 8 already shot as well. But so again 4 weeks left, 1 day of which is to complete episodes 5 and 6, and then the rest is 7 and 8.
And Joseph, I can only imagine the ideas that have been gestating in that time.
Well, yeah,
we're already on to the chief. Yeah, I've got
advantage of it.
I've got stuff in already for 7 and 8. I mean, we're ready
really great stuff. There's like really cool stuff to come because the mythology of the show just really expands in the back half.
Well, I just
can't tell you what it is.
Stay tuned.
Well, Joseph and Don, I want to thank you both so much for joining us at Film Music Live. I want you all to stream all seasons of Chucky on Peacock with Joseph's scores for Curse and Cult of Chucky, available on Backlot Music. And thanks to Nikki Walsh and Kenya at Backlot for their promos of Cult of Chucky today. A special thanks to our producers Mark Northam and Dale Turner and our designer Mark Banning. And I will see you on the next Film Music Live Monday, October 30th at 1 p.m. as the Newton brothers bring down the fall of the House of Usher. And as they spend 5 nights at Freddy's. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Daniel. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.